to our suffering, my dear.
There's not enough scotch in the world for that one.
Shirley, what are you writing now?
A little novella. I'm calling none of your goddamn business.
Well, you were invited to stay here for a few days until we could find a place.
Shirley has these bouts.
I read your story. What are you doing in here? It made me feel thrillingly horrible.
Do you know what it's like to have a secret?
When I first saw it, I was like, it's like a fever dream. And that's what was exciting to me because it felt like a study on that thin veil between the subconscious and the conscious, between dreaming and waking. And it was really like the psychological space that Boar lived in and where I was going,
right.
You know?
Hi, I'm Josephine Decker. I'm the director of the feature film Shirley.
Hi, I'm Tamar-Kali, the composer for the feature film Shirley.
So Tamar, we had a crazy short time to do the composing for this film, which in retrospect was so silly because then we ended up premiering like 6 months after we locked picture. But I guess I was just curious, like how you work under pressure and also like where you go for inspiration kind of when you're starting a project.
Well, my first foray into film scoring was a really ridiculously tight schedule. Mudbound, I wrote, recorded, mixed in 4.5 weeks, and it was the first time I'd ever scored for film. So I really got a trial by fire. And so anything that grants me a little more time than that is kind of like pie, you know, at that point. But also what was great is that we had a little bit of a courting period because I saw the film and you and I spoke, but then there was a little time before we ended up actually coming together to work on it. So I had a lot of time to digest your work and really have feelings about it. And also I was doing like a lot of research about Shirley, just her real life, since it's, you know, the novel is a fictionalized, you know, telling of her life. So I was delving into a lot of that stuff. So by the time we were ready to really get working, I had a lot of time to sit with your work and just, you know, the biography of Shirley.
How did you feel, by the way, I'm so curious, with temp score, how do you feel about temp score? Do you find that it helps you, or do you find that sometimes it throws you off, or is it just sort of changes every movie?
Well, it has the reputation of being the bane of every composer's existence. But since I feel relatively still fresh and new in this world, I'm trying not to like develop any impressions or like solid ideas about how things are going to function. And one of the things that helped me do that actually was your temp and Shirley. I don't know if you remember this, but I was telling you that it was the most interestingly temped film I had ever seen. And that really made me want to take a stab at it because I was just like, oh, that's so interesting. No, seriously. I mean, it was eclectic. It was emotional. It was beautiful. And because of your references in terms of other art forms, whether it be music, whatever, how you came to it was really earnest and authentic. I don't think you were just like grabbing a bunch of cues from other people's movies and throwing them on your film. And I think that's what made a huge difference. Like it functioned almost as like a peek into your mind in terms of your aesthetic musically, and almost like a playlist for the emotions that you were trying to convey through the music. Like I really appreciated it. It was a great roadmap.
Usually I temp with like pieces, like standalone, like kind of usually like new music, weird, you know, esoteric classical, you know, pieces or in that vein. Like I remember the temp there was one really crazy temp song that actually you like, I love what you ended up doing there. It was like when Rose and Fred are having sex and she's sort of like decides to dominate him. And it was like this weird, like atonal modernist piece. And it was just, and I was like, I don't know how, like what Tamar's going to do with this. And then what you did was like so awesome. It was like so wild. And it had actually, a flavor that had that same like kind of like unexpected. I have no idea what instrument's going to play next. I have no idea what, you know, what rhythm is going to come.
that was one of those pieces that in retrospect, I really was cracking up about the process because I was watching it on loop and it's like this raw sex scene, you know? And it was like, I'm in a room by myself in the studios around it. I'm like watching this raw sex scene like 20 times in a row and like trying to, you know, get the vibe. It was such a journey. It was such a ride, the whole process. But we worked, you know, when we're working with Nancy, the music editor, we did develop some themes right away because, and connecting to that cue, it was this theme around activation, like when Roses gets activated in this way, kind of like by the spirit or the idea of Shirley as this non-conventional woman, and possession. So those were some of the themes we were playing with that we were creating musical motifs for. So that one went really left, but it was still like in the realm of that stuff that we were exploring around like possession and, you know, activating this other personality.
One of the things that I love so much about our score, and we were talking about it early on, was the voice, and you know, feeling like, okay, there's a movie about women's voices, you know, and women kind of finding their voices, whether that's an author's narrative voice or whether Rose is sort of finding her voice in a larger, like, who am I as a person kind of sense. And I think we talked a lot about how voices felt important, and it was so fun to hear the way that you we went wild with your voice in the movie, and it's such a pleasure. Like, I just get so much joy out of hearing those cues. Like,
well, you pushed me. I always, whenever, you know, I have the pleasure of talking about the score, I talk about how, as this auteur filmmaker, your bravery, and how, for me, I usually try, you know, when I have a musical idea, I try to be very sensitive about how I present it, because, you know, when a director has gotten to the point where you're dealing with score, oftentimes you've sat with this film for maybe years, you've gone all the parts up, and this is kind of like the icing, right? And so I don't want to, I know you need something to react to, but at the same time, I'm not trying to push the envelope where you're going to have a strong negative reaction. So I try to temper my ideas as I'm moving along. And with you, I would be like, okay, all right, you know, and then you'd be like, oh yeah, more, you know, and I was just like, you really wanted me to swing for the fences. And that was awesome. It was a very freeing process because I had just come out of a project that was definitely more structured, and just in terms of the freedom that I had and the fact that you were requesting me to really push it was awesome. So it's like, you know, you're very much a part of that, because I would do a little something and you're like, I can't remember what cue it was. Oh, the miscarriage scene.
Oh, yes.
And like, I was doing some stuff and then I did some, you know, and you were like, ooh, what was that? Like, you're like, more of that, you know? And so then I just started like yipping on the, you know, and I was just like, wow, I could really just go off.
Oh yeah, I love that cue. Oh my gosh, yeah, and the ending too. At the very end, the cliff. You know, that you gave there was so much like magical voice work that you were doing.
Thank you. And I mean, we spoke about that, like the importance of, you know, that's another thing that like made this project feel like, oh yeah, I definitely want to do this. When you were saying that you were interested in exploring the female voice as a lead instrument in the score, you know, because I wonder, had you not kind of created that prompt, where this score would have landed. And I was able to really lean on my classical choral background. And I gave the three women, they each had their voice. Like, you know, Rose was a mezzo soprano, Paula was a soprano, and Shirley's the alto.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you did that. That's so cool. That makes sense.
Step away. You were right. It doesn't take any energy at all. It's just a hop. Slide the right foot forward.
And it could all be over.